The Chiefs just revealed the truth behind their most controversial roster decisions, and you won't believe what Brett Veach confessed in a closed media interview. While everyone thought they were improvising with these crazy roster choices, the reality is they knew about Rashid Rice's suspension days before the cuts and already had a master plan worked out down to the smallest details. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, because Veach also explained why they cut Mike Pennell, a guy everyone thought would be a starter, and revealed the behind-the-scenes negotiations that almost happened and could have completely changed the face of this team. The bombshell he dropped about the backfield plans and changes still to come will make you rethink everything about the Chiefs' strategy for this season. Chiefs general manager Brett Veach spoke with the media today about some pretty interesting things in an interview that was closed to local credentialed reporters, and Pete Sweeney from the Kansas City Star, along with Matt Derrick from Chiefs Digest, did fantastic work talking about two main subjects in their reporting. The first was their decision to keep 8 wide receivers on the initial 53-man roster, and then what the hell is going on with Mike Pennell not making the Chiefs' 53-man roster? Let's talk about Rashid Rice first. Veach said they were informed a few days before cutdowns that there was better than a 50% chance Rice's situation would get resolved before the season, which really meant there was a pretty high chance the suspension would be starting week 1. That's why they kept 8 receivers. They were able to do this by releasing some veterans, with the primary guy being tight end Robert Tonyan, who is currently on the practice squad. The belief, according to multiple reporters now, is that once Rice officially gets placed on the reserve suspended list, Tonyan will get signed to the Chiefs' 53-man roster. And man, that's exactly what happened. Robert Tonyan was officially signed to the 53-man roster after Rashid Rice was placed on the commissioner's suspended list. Veach's chess move completed perfectly. They managed to maintain flexibility with 8 receivers when they needed to, and now they're back to 7 receivers, 4 tight ends, and 4 running backs. But here comes the information that changed everything. Rice didn't accept just any suspension. He accepted specifically a 6-game suspension, starting immediately with the season opener against the Chargers in Brazil. He can only return in week 7 against the Raiders. This means he'll miss games against the Chargers, Eagles, Super Bowl rematch, Giants, Ravens, Jaguars, and Lions. The NFL initially wanted at least 10 games, but Rice and the NFLPA managed to negotiate it down to 6. What makes this story even more dramatic is the context behind Rice's suspension. Rice was driving a Lamborghini Urus at 119 miles per hour when he got involved in a street race with another car. The chain reaction crash involved multiple vehicles and left several people injured. The most shocking part? Rice and the other driver fled the scene without checking if anyone needed medical help. Rice was sentenced to 30 days in jail and 5 years probation after pleading guilty to 2 third-degree felony charges. He also paid over $115,000 in restitution to victims to cover medical expenses. The reason Rice accepted starting the suspension now, according to sources close to the situation, is that he wanted to serve his punishment early in the season instead of risking missing crucial games later when the Chiefs will be fighting for playoff positioning. But let's focus on Tonyan. He would potentially be a solid option to have out there at times, even when Kelce isn't. This would provide some relief for him now and again at age 35, soon to be 36. The guy is healthy, talking about Tonyan, and that's been the knock on him the last couple of seasons. He looked great out there, having one of the most standout preseason performances of basically anybody on the roster. However, here's something the Chiefs could do with Rice suspended and out the first 6 weeks of the season. They could leverage more 12 or 13 personnel, which they kind of did a lot last year anyway, but that puts 2 or 3 tight ends on the field together rather than more receivers. So Tonyan, Gray, and Kelce, that's 3 pretty solid options in the passing game. But what about the wide receiver room? What could they do to absorb the loss of Rice? Well, Veach immediately pointed to Juju Smith-Schuster, and I think he makes the most sense to fill in the slot more for Rice. You're not going to be able to directly replace Rice, to be clear here. It's going to be a multifaceted approach, but Juju is healthier than he's ever been. He's had a great camp and has built great chemistry with Mahomes over the years. Can't forget that back in 2022, Mahomes and Juju connected for over 1,000 yards, and Juju was Mahomes' wide receiver 1. That's pretty insane. So you'll have Juju involved. Then of course Worthy. He's going to be pretty heavily involved himself. He's a guy that has shown he's much more than than just a speed guy. He can be used behind the line of scrimmage, short routes, intermediate, deep down the field. He can kind of do it all. Connecting these offensive changes with rookie development, the plan for Worthy would be to be out there as much as humanly possible, since he's going to be one of Mahomes' top targets. I also think the plan for the coaching staff, at least the preferred plan, would have been to have Jalen Royals involved a bit more with Rice gone, because they have pretty similar skill sets and it might be part of the reason they drafted him. However, he's dealing with knee tendonitis and hasn't been practicing. ESPN reports he should be good to go for week 1 in Brazil. But the question is, how much will a rookie in Andy Reid's offense who's been battling injury even get used? The next question I have is, how will the team use Hollywood Brown if he plays week 1, given that he's been injured since early in training camp? I think he's going to be one to watch because that foot is almost ready to go. He could have potentially played in the preseason finale. Now, getting back to the running back room, the situation gets even more interesting. In Veach's interview, he shared that while they have 4 running backs on the roster, the plan is to dress 3 of them on game day. So as of right now, that's Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, and either Elijah Mitchell or Carson Steele. Your guess is as good as mine as to which one that actually is. But right now, I think Elijah Mitchell will be the guy who doesn't dress out. ESPN reports that Mitchell still isn't where the team hoped he would be, but they don't want to release him right now, especially considering how valuable he could be if injuries hit the room. This reminds me of similar situations with backup players in previous seasons. The honest analysis here is that the Chiefs are applying a very sophisticated risk management strategy. They prefer to carry an extra player who might not contribute immediately, but who could be crucial if shit hits the fan. And Veach confirmed they're signing veteran running back and former first-round draft pick Clyde Edwards-Helaire to the practice squad. CEH was recently released by the Saints, and now they have a guy on the practice squad who knows the system and can do a little bit of everything in the offense and be elevated in case of emergency if they need to. Shifting focus to more controversial issues, Brett Veach addressed the defensive line, specifically the Mike Pennel situation, and why a guy most people had making the 53-man roster as a starter doesn't seem like he's coming back. Well, Veach said they're continually trying to get deeper at the position, younger and more athletic. Once they traded for Derek Nnadi from the Jets, it seemed like they felt more comfortable moving on from Pennel. Nnadi is 5 years younger after all, has played basically every game of his career, so very durable. And Veach looked at them as similar level players, saying, "But I do think you take into consideration just the length of the season. If you had to give a slight edge comparing Nnadi to Pennel, it was just, 4 or 5 years younger and a guy that's played a lot of reps. But look, I mean, we're still active at that position." The situation gets even more interesting when Veach revealed they tried to make a trade before trading for Derek Nnadi. Their offer was beaten out by another team. That team that beat them out was the New York Jets, the same team they actually traded Nnadi from, which was interesting, but they traded for Jawan Briggs from the Cleveland Browns, and the Chiefs tried to trade for him as well. Obviously, New York ended up getting him, but Kansas City was intrigued because he was only 23 years old and honestly, much more athletic than both Nnadi and Pennel. Well, it doesn't matter, because that's the issue you run into when you draft at the back of all these rounds when you're a very successful team like the Kansas City Chiefs. The analysis of this whole situation reveals how difficult it is to maintain a competitive roster when you're always drafting last. The Chiefs constantly have to be more creative and aggressive in the trade market and free agency. Of course, the Browns would prefer a 6th round pick from the Jets over the Chiefs because that's going to be the difference of like 30 picks. Anyway, after they couldn't get Briggs, they of course reached out to the Jets and traded for Derek Nnadi. Remember, it's a conditional 6th and 7th round pick swap, so depending on how many snaps Nnadi ends up playing, Kansas City might not have to swap picks at all. I'd say my bet is that Nnadi does play that many snaps, and the swap does end up happening in that draft because the defensive tackle room is a bit thin at the moment, especially with Amari Newton-Lott dealing with that ankle issue. It's still an odd ordeal for the Chiefs to move on from Nnadi in the offseason, only to then turn around months later and trade for him, releasing Mike Pennel, who they'd been showing every indication prior that he was going to be a starter along the defensive line. Well, can't go back. But it's worth mentioning that Veach didn't close the door on the idea of a Pennel reunion later this season, saying Pennel has been best when they've gotten him back in short spurts. They love the guy, and so they'll certainly be keeping that door open. I think that's the best case scenario here. Sign Pennel to the practice squad later in the season, of course if he's willing, with Kansas City using him down the stretch and into the playoffs. Following this line of practice squad additions, the Chiefs finalized their practice squad with a series of signings that show exactly what Veach was talking about. Mike Edwards, the veteran safety who was one of the surprise cuts, was officially signed back to the practice squad. Edwards is a guy who won 2 Super Bowls, one playing against the Chiefs with Tampa Bay, and another with the Chiefs. Having him back on the practice squad is tremendous security for a position where the Chiefs are young. They also confirmed the signings of Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Carson Steele to the practice squad, exactly as Veach had anticipated. CEH knows the system like the back of his hand and can be elevated at any moment if something happens with the main backfield. Chris Oladokun also returned to the practice squad as the third quarterback. From the new faces Veach mentioned, they made official Zach Pickens, the ex-Bears who has that 9.23 athletic score, Roderick Martin, the massive run-stuffer ex-Lions, Ethan Driscoll, the 22-year-old edge rusher from Oklahoma, Tyreek Smith, ex-Ohio State who led the Big Ten in QB hits, and Jaden Robinson, ex-Panthers safety. The practice squad now has 17 total players, including Chukwuebuka Godric as an international pathway program exception. With all these pieces now in place, the season-opening showdown against the Chargers in Brazil has gained even more importance. It'll be the first real test to see how this new offensive dynamic works without Rice. The Chargers have always been a thorn in the Chiefs' side. Since Mahomes became a starter, Kansas City has won 11 of 14 matchups, but 10 of them were decided by 1 score, and 7 of the last 8 were 1-score games. The pressure is going to be all on the left side of the offensive line, mainly on Kingsley Suamataia, but Josh Simmons is also a rookie and will have growing pains. The offense needs to figure out how to function without Rice very quickly. We'll see how much Christian Fulton works into the secondary game plan now that Nazeed Johnson is on IR and Joshua Williams is the depth piece. I'll be watching the linebacker room too, especially Drew Tranquill's back, which has been dealing with injury issues recently. But with all these roster moves now defined and the practice squad strategically assembled, the Chiefs have shown once again why Brett Veach is considered one of the most visionary GMs in the NFL. They transformed what could have been a crisis with Rice's suspension into an opportunity to showcase the depth and flexibility of the roster. The game in Brazil is going to be epic, and now we know exactly what pieces the Chiefs will use to play this offensive chess game. Robert Tonyan back on the 53-man roster, a receiver room still stacked even without Rice, and a practice squad loaded with talent ready to be called up at any moment. Chiefs Kingdom can breathe easy. The plan is working exactly as Veach envisioned.